Hi everyone, in this tutorial I'll show you how to use the Type tool, and I'll also show you how to create shapes in After Effects. Alright, let's get started. After using Photoshop and Illustrator, creating shapes and using the Type tool are both going to seem really familiar to you. The Type tool can be found at the top toolbar here, or you can use the shortcut T to get to it. I'm just going to click on it, and that's going to open up some of my type options. If these don't open automatically when you click on the tool, you can go to Window. You want to open your character panel, that's this one right here. And I also opened up my paragraph panel, which is down here. To begin typing, all you do is click anywhere on your composition with the Type tool, and it's going to create an empty text layer and give you a cursor up here that you can start typing with. You can click off to deselect it, and we can use our selection tool up here, or use the shortcut V to open it up, and we can move it around in our composition. And if we select it, then we can go in and start changing some of our options here. We can change our font type here. You have some more options here for the style. And you can change the color right here on the side. Just click on the fill swatch. It's just like Photoshop and Illustrator. We'll click on that, and we can change the color of our font. And then we also have the option here for a stroke. So if you click on the stroke swatch, it's going to bring it to the front, and then you can double click it, and then we can select a stroke color, and then hit OK. We have our font size here. You can scale that up and down, and all you have to do is hover over it, and you'll see those double arrows, and then when you click, you can just drag. Or if you just click on it, you can put in a number like that. You have different options here we can drag on. That'll adjust the distance between the words, and we can stretch them out, but I wouldn't adjust this one too much. Here we have our stroke options, so we can adjust the width of it here. And you can do if you want the stroke over the fill, or you can set it behind the fill. We have some more options here for stretching the text, but again, you don't really want to adjust these because it's just warping the text. And then here you have some more options for making it bold, italic. We can set it to all uppercase if we want. We can also set it to all uppercase, but with the first letter of each word being bigger. And then you have options here for superscript and subscript. And I'll just turn all of those off. Down here we have our paragraph options. So right now it's left justified, which is aligned to the left side. We can switch that to the middle. So now they're centered over each other in the middle. Or we can switch it to the right. Now they're in line with each other on the right side here. Okay, I'm just going to delete out this text layer by selecting on it and hitting delete. Next, I'll show you how to make a solid. So I mentioned in an earlier video that right now we don't actually have a black background on here. It's actually transparent, and that black is there just so we have something to see instead of the checkerboard here. So say we want to make a solid background to fill our composition. We could go up to layer. Right now you'll see that everything is grayed out. If you want to use any of these layer options here, you have to make sure you're first in the timeline or in the viewer here. So have one of these selected, then we can go to layer, new, and we have some options here. So you can create text from here as well, but we're going to create a solid. You're not going to need to worry about these ones right now. So I'm going to click on solid, and it's going to give us a few options. Here we can name our solid. So I'm just going to name that BG for background. We can change the size of it here by just clicking and dragging, or you can click on it and input a number. We're going to be using pixels for this, and then we'll have it on square pixels. I actually want it the exact size of the composition, so I'm just going to go make comp size, and then that switches it to 1920 by 1080, which is the size of our composition. We can select our color here. If I just click on that, I can pick a color, or you can use the eyedropper and pick a color from anywhere. And let's go with something like that. So when we hit OK, it's going to create our solid color, drop it into our timeline. It named it background, and then we see it up here. So you can turn that off and on, and if we toggle our transparency, you can see that it's actually transparent underneath it. If we're not happy with our color, we can have it selected, go to Layer, Solid Settings, and then we can change the options in here again. So we can change the color if we wanted. So that's our solid that we created. I'm going to hit undo just to move it back to position, and I'm going to lock it so I don't accidentally move it while I'm working. All right, next I'll show you how to create shapes, and again, this is going to seem really familiar to you because we've done this in Illustrator, and you can also create shapes in Photoshop. So if we go up to our toolbar here, we have our rectangle tool, and if you just click on it and hold, just like with the other programs, we can see our other shapes below here. Okay, so I'm just going to create a rectangle. I'll select my rectangle tool, and then I have my options up here for my fill and stroke. To draw my rectangle, I just have to click and draw it right onto my composition. Like with the other programs, if you hold Shift, it's going to scale it uniformly, and without Shift, you can just drag it and scale it however you'd like. So once you make your shape, it's going to create a shape layer in here. I'm just going to click the arrow here to collapse that. To name our shape layer, you can just right click on it, and then right at the bottom here we have rename. We have our shape options up here, so we could fill it by just clicking on the swatch there and then choosing a color. We also have our stroke options here. Right here it's crossed through, so that means it's off. So if you just click where it says stroke, that's going to bring up our options. So we can pick a color, or we could choose a gradient. And then we can also choose our blend mode, and we have these in the other programs, and we can choose the opacity of it. I'm going to set it to solid color and then hit OK. Right now it's set to red, so it's a little hard to see, so we can just click on the stroke swatch, and that's going to bring up our color options. So I'll pick a color and hit OK, and right now it's set to 5 pixels, and we can either click and input a new number, or we can just drag and make that bigger. We also have the gradient options in our fill. If we just click on fill, we can turn it off. We can go back to our solid color, or we can pick the type of gradient we want. I'm going to hit OK. When we added our gradient, it added it down here and opened up our layer. We'll be going into all of this in a later tutorial, but for now we can just collapse that and ignore it. If we want to adjust our gradient, we can just click on the swatch here, and now we have a few options. If we select the color here, we could choose our gradient colors. If you want to add another color to the gradient, you can just hover below the bar here, and when it says click to add stop, we'll just click and add another color. And then we can change the color of that as well. And you can also change how they fade into each other. If you want to delete it, just click on it and then hit delete. Okay, I'm just going to delete out my rectangle, so I'll select it and hit delete. I won't go through the rest of them, but you can make these shapes as well. Next, I'll show you the pen tool, which we already have experience with from Illustrator. You can get to the pen tool in After Effects by using the shortcut G. So I'm going to click on that, and this is another way we can make shapes. So to create a shape with your pen tool, all you want to do is just start drawing with it over top of your composition without any layer selected. But first, I'm just going to turn my fill off, and then I'm going to make my stroke a lot smaller. Okay, and then I'm just going to click in my composition and start drawing. And then to close it, like with Illustrator, you'll see the little circle icon beside the pen, and then I'm just going to click, and that's going to complete it. So now I want to go back and edit this because it's a really messy heart, and it's a little different than in Illustrator. So if I want, I can just take my pen tool and hover over an anchor point, and it's automatically going to switch it back to my selection tool. So with that, I can just move it around when I'm hovering over. And you can also just hover over a handle and adjust that as well. If I click on it, I'll show the handles. And then you can just drag them and move them around like that. If you want to add an anchor point, all you have to do is with your pen tool selected, just hover over anywhere on the path and click, and it's going to add one. To remove an anchor point, if we hover over it and then press Control or Command on a Mac, we'll get the little minus sign there, and then we can click and just remove it. And then we'll want to adjust these again. To convert our anchor point, so right now this is the square anchor point, it doesn't have handles and it has the really hard edges. If we hover over it with our pen tool and then press Alt or Option on a Mac, we'll see our convert anchor tool like we have in Illustrator. And then I'm just going to click, and it's going to change the anchor point. And then we can just go in and adjust that. If I want to go back, I'll just click again and move it back. And you'll notice when we made that shape, it made a shape layer down here in our timeline. And we have all of the same options for this shape as we did with our other ones. So we could add a fill, we could take the stroke off if we want, and we can also switch that to a gradient. And that's how you can create shapes, text, and solids in After Effects. And that's going to do it for this tutorial.